Good to see you back, guys. Again, I'm back with a new tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn how we can set DOM values. We have total 5 methods, and using this method we can update any DOM value. Otherwise, we can add any DOM value. We can change inner text. Also, we can change the HTML. We can set new attribute. We can remove attribute. So without wasting your time, let's start the practical and see how it's works. So as you can see, side by side, I open my Visual Studio Code editor and my browser using Live Server extension, and I already opened my previous HTML file and main.js file. Let's jump into the index.html file. Here you can see we have an ID named header, and inside this header tag we have h1 tag. So I decide I'm going to change the inner HTML of this ID. I want to set heading2 tag with different value, but I'm not going to change anything in my index.html file. I'm going to do the job using set method. For that, I'm back to my main.js file, and here I'm going to type document.getElementById header, then our method name dot inner HTML, because I want to change the inner HTML, equal to, inside the double quotes we need to pass this string, and as I told you, now I'm going to use heading2 tag. So here I'm going to pass h2 close h2, and between heading2 I'm going to pass hello. And before I save this file, I'm going to return the inner HTML in my console. For that, here I need to pass document.getElementById header inner HTML, then semicolon to end this line. If I save this file, as you can see in the header portion, it changes the content. It replaces h1 tag with h2 tag because we change inner HTML. At first, we target the element by their ID name. Then we change the inner HTML of this ID. If I show you my console, inspect, console, you can see the result. Here you can see now our new HTML structure is h1 to hello. But if I print this inner HTML section before I change it, let me show you. But at first, I'm going to remove this line. I don't need it. And I'm going to copy this line and I'm going to paste it before this set. So if I set this file, oops, I forgot to print this element in my console. So I copy this line and paste after this line. If I set this file, now you can see the result. Our first result came from before the change, and our second result come from after the change. So this is how we can change inner HTML using set method. Similarly, you can set inner text to any element. So for now, I'm going to remove these lines. I don't need it. And now I'm going to show you how we can change attribute values. For that, we need to use set attribute, otherwise attribute method. So let's back to the Visual Studio Code editor. If I show you my index.html file, as you can see, inside this div we have multiple attributes: ID, class name, style, and now I want to change class attribute value. I want to replace XYZ with ABC. So let's back to the JS file and see how we can do it. At first, I'm going to duplicate this line and comment out previous one. And here I'm going to type document.getElementById header. We target our element by their ID name. And now here I want to set a new attribute name. For that, we need to use set attribute method. Set attribute. Next, I'm going to remove the unusual lines. These are not required for now. Then inside the ground braces, first we need to pass our attribute name, which is class. And in our second parameter, we need to pass the value name, which is ABC. And semicolon to end this line. Now, let's print the attribute in our console. For that, again we need to type a get method, get attribute. Get attribute, inside the round braces, we need to pass the attribute name, class. If I set this file, you can see in my console, we successfully replace our class name with ABC. And if I show you my elements section, as you can see, let me show you. Here you can see it replace our class name in my DOM with ABC. So this is how we can change any attribute value. Using set attribute method, also you can change inline CSS value. Let me show you the example. So again, I'm going to duplicate this line and comment out previous one. And this time I want to target our attribute, and our attribute name is style. And here I'm going to pass a new value, and our value is border. Border colon, and here I need to pass the values. Border 10 pixel dot 8, and I want to set border color white. If I set this file, you can see the result. So we successfully replaced the inline CSS value using this method, but this is not the right way. In our upcoming tutorial, we are going to learn about it. And if you want to print the value in your console, just here you need to type style. If I set this file, now you can see my console, the value, border, 10 pixel, dot 8 and white color. Basically, I want to say, with the help of JavaScript, we can change CSS properties. And we are going to learn about it in our upcoming tutorials. Now, let's talk about our next method, which is attribute method. So again, I'm going to duplicate this line and comment out previous one. And for now, I'm going to remove these unnecessary lines. And here I'm going to type document.getElementById attributes. As you know, here we need to pass array. So inside the square braces, we need to pass the index number. And the index number of our class is 1. If I show you my index.html file, in our 0th index we have id, and in our first index we have class. That's why I pass 1, and I want to change the value of this attribute. So here I'm going to pass dot value. Then we need to use equal to sign, and inside the double quotes we need to pass the value. And I want to set our class name ZZZ, and semicolon to end this line. Before I set this file, I want to print our attribute value. So here I'm going to pass class, and I'm going to set this file. Now you can see in my console, it replaces our class name with ZZZ. So if you use this method, you need to remember the index number. But in our previous method, you need to pass the attribute name. That's the difference. Let's talk about our last attribute, which is remove attribute. This attribute is specially used to remove the existing attributes. So let's jump into the Visual Studio Code editor and see how it's works. As you can see in this div, we have total 3 attributes, ID, class and style. As you can see, this div have red border color. Let me increase the size, 10 pixels, and I'm going to set this file. Now when you set this file, you want to remove this border, and I want to remove it using JavaScript. So let's back to the main.js file, and again I'm going to duplicate this line and comment out previous one. And here we need to pass the attribute name. Document.getElementById header, and our attribute name is remove attribute. Remove attributes. Then inside the round braces, inside the double quotes, we need to pass the attribute name. And our attribute name is style. And semicolon to end this line. If I save this file, you can see the result. Now you can see in my browser, it removed the style attribute with their value. That's why now we don't have the border to this header portion. And if I show you the HTML structure from the elements section, now you can see inside the body tag and inside this div, we have a header. But if you notice, you can see we have only 2 attributes, ID and class. It successfully removed the style attribute. But if I back to my index.html file, you can see still our style attribute exists in this div. So in this tutorial, you learn how we can target DOM values, and also we can set new values to our DOM. So this is it for this tutorial. In our upcoming tutorial, we are going to set CSS values. So this is it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching this video.